Hello, everybody. Marcus van Art here again. Authentic Business Communication coming to you with the last delivery in a series of 4. So, thus far, we've been speaking about being concise and compelling during speech. And as you would know, the focus has been on being concise and compelling precisely when you're under pressure, right? So, thus far, what we've covered is we've spoken about 3 different techniques that you might use in order to get your thoughts across compellingly and concisely. And the first one was the seesaw, as you've seen in the previous delivery, uh, discussing things from 2 perspectives. The second one was unpacking ideas in threes, and I said that it is typically useful to do that or to use that approach if it's a large topic that you want to condense into 3 tight areas or 3 tight specific points that you want to make. Then, most recently, we spoke about unpacking ideas in consecutive steps, where the idea is that if there's any process that you need to describe, that you do a stepwise approach with that process. Now, finally, today, I'm coming to a slightly more sophisticated approach, and that is the fourth one, meaning talking about the big picture first and then sort of getting into the detail of what you want to share. Now, people ask, of course, where do I use any of these techniques? And typically, what I would like to let you know is that when it comes to a bigger picture versus detail, or bigger picture versus the finite nuts and bolts approach in talking or in speech, it is very useful to use that when you're in a position where your audience doesn't quite know as much as you do about the topic. So it behooves you as the speaker to chat with them in terms of the context first, right? Give them a little bit of background understanding before you get into detailed delivery. So that is, in a nutshell, the point behind bigger picture versus detail, giving context before you get into content. So, before we dive into the technique itself, it's probably my job to remind you that this is not about speech only. Primarily, it is about thinking. How you think is how you will communicate, right? So it is a mindset approach, and the mindset is, first of all, think not only what you want to say, but how much time do I want to spend on my topic? What is the main message I want to get across? And then how many minimum essential ideas do I need to pack into my delivery? Secondly, frame. You have to know how you will start. And you have to know that in a verbatim sense. And I will be sharing with you some examples, verbatim examples that you can happily steal from me and use them for yourselves. And then the third thing is, how am I going to unpack? And in this case, we will be unpacking in a bigger picture versus a detailed picture. So the bigger picture versus the detailed picture really come down to 2 levels of analysis, right? You can look at any topic from a detailed perspective. For instance, if you've got a camera, you can zoom your camera out and open, and you can see the flower in the garden, right? But you can also zoom in with your camera and you can see the very petals of the flower in isolation, or even the droplets of water on the petals, right? And so it is a matter of how much detail you want to use at any given time. So let me give you a few examples of how this works. First of all, you want to have a good framing statement, and you'll probably hear this from me over and over again, because framing gets the listener ready for them to actually listen, take note, and that it gets them ready to understand how you're going to share your content. So I actually had a recent comment from one of the viewers, and the person said that he was asked a question inside a meeting, and he thought that the question deserved a lot of detailed content as part of an answer. And when he got to the end of his answer, the director said to him, "Yeah, I actually only needed that last bit," right? So he said to me in a comment here on the YouTube channel that had he known that the listener only wanted the last bit, he would have focused on that. And I replied to him that that is the purpose of a frame. In a way, your framing statement gets an agreement going between you and your listener. If you tell them that you're going to give them big picture and then detail, they might say, "Great, go ahead." Or they might say, "No, no, no, don't give me too much detail. I just require the big picture." Or just give me the detail at a fairly high level of analysis, right? So they can either agree with you, or they can stop you right there in your tracks and help you to give them the information the way they want it. So in this case, a simple frame might be something like, let me provide some context first before I explain in detail. So I'm giving the person a heads up and a warning. Or you might say, let me provide a little bit of background or context because I want you to understand the situation that we find ourselves in right now before I get into the day-to-day details, right? So now there are a few examples on your slide. As you can see, just a few variations. To provide a big picture overview, let me first say X, Y, Z. And then once you've done that, you go into, okay, now let me discuss some specific examples at ground level. Or you might say, to give you some general context first, and off you go with the general context. And then you go into the detail part where you say, now let me discuss some specific examples or what this looks like in a more detailed sense. And you start unpacking your detailed pieces. Or another verbatim might be, if you stand back, it gives you an appreciation of the larger picture. So let me discuss that with you first. And once you've done that, you might say, I'd like to provide some instances of daily practical examples. And at any time, your listener can then say, sure, go ahead, or no, I don't need all that detail, right? So it's a very consultative way of chatting with somebody else. It relaxes you too, because you get feedback from your listener. Now, as you can see at the bottom of the slide, it says that the technique works well when the listener doesn't have the same background or knowledge base as you. It gives them context within which to interpret the detailed content. And I keep on saying in my classes, folks, provide context before you get into content. That way you will stay safe. So here are some more examples, and here's your example. You want to explain something fairly complex to somebody, and you might say to them, this is a fairly technical area, so to make it relatable and to save time, I will first give you some context. Following that, I will share some examples we commonly see every day. And this is again in the kind of situation where the person doesn't necessarily share your knowledge base. So you give them background, a few placeholders, a few concepts that they can hold onto before you delve into the detailed content. Because very often the problem is that people delve into the details first and they tune their listener out completely. And so if I then describe the big picture, I might say, first, let me explain that this technology is used in almost all modern communication, such as TV, radio stations, the military, and also even hobbies such as radio-controlled vehicles. So that's the context that I gave the person. Now I'm going to get into my nerdy content. To give you an example, the same chip used in this microphone also works well in my son's radio-controlled car. It serves the function of processing raw electrical signal into information for the receiver on the other end of the process. And there you go. So you can see that I sort of got the person's attention first with the contextual information, and then I got into the nuts and bolts. I'm going to end off with one final situational example. Imagine somebody joins my YouTube project, say as a producer or an editor or something, and it's their first day. And they say to me, Marcus, could you please provide me an overview of your current YouTube project? As you know, I'm brand new, so please give me as much information as you think I would need. Okay, here's my opportunity as a communicator to give the person context and then delve into the content. Framing statement. So, John, thanks and welcome. I've been looking forward to having you join my team. First, let me provide some background and context in terms of who we are designing this for, and then I'll delve into the more specific subcomponents and content covered. Right, so John now knows not only that I'm going to share information with him, but how I'm going to be sharing it. And then I break up my argument into the two main parts, the big picture and the detail. So let me first talk about the clients we want to serve. They're frequently highly educated, internationally trained professionals looking for an opportunity to launch their Canadian career. Some clients are already in the Canadian workforce, but are looking for a change or new direction. Okay, so now John understands who are the people that we are working with and what their objectives are, but not at a detailed analysis level, sort of big picture. And now I'm ready to move over into the detail. The lecture series that I want to offer is broken into 3 segments, John. First, I want to establish a lecture series of the content I regularly teach. Secondly, I want to start a series of interviews, including HR professionals, newcomers, and other coaches, such as myself. And finally, I'm aiming to develop a weekly Q&A session for broadcast focused on practical challenges new Canadians face in the workplace. So you can see that I actually did a bit of a combination of 2 techniques. I zoomed out and gave him context, and then when I zoomed in, I broke up the detail into 3 main parts. That is the final idea that I want to leave with you today. The techniques that I taught you thus far, namely the seesaw, the 3 main parts, the steps-wise approach, and the big picture detail approach, folks, can be combined quite artfully. So in this case, what I did is I zoomed out, and then when I zoomed in, I used a 3 main parts unpack as well. Now, you might say this is nice theory. let's make it more practical. And indeed, I will be doing that. My next sessions will be dealing with how do we apply these unpacking techniques when we are dealing with difficult interview questions. Because I know that many of you are either planning to move into a new career, actively looking for a new career. Many of you are in the process of actively interviewing, and I'm going to be taking specific, frequently asked interview questions and applying these techniques to them. I encourage you to use the Q&A, sorry, not the Q&A, rather the comment section below. And you can let me know if there are any specific questions, interview questions, that you would like me to help you answer using some of these techniques. So comment all the time, please. Comments are really, really welcome. And I will try to respond to each and every one of them as I've been doing thus far. Additionally, if you enjoy this series, please like, subscribe, and let other people know about it. Let's spread the word. I want to thank you very much for your time today. I hope that you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you very soon. Thank you. Goodbye.